Hi, this is your host Alan Bhartia, and we are here at Open Source Summit in Bilbao, Spain. And today we have with us Alain Schoovers, product owner at the Dutch Tax and Custom Administration. Alain, it's great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
This is the first time not only I'm talking to you, I'm pretty sure that our audience are, of course, you have a big space market there, but from tax perspective, where folks are hearing about somebody from the Dutch tax and, custom administration. So I would love to know a bit about your job, your role. What do you folks do as part of this department?
Well, thanks for asking. Thanks for having me. I work for the Dutch Tax Administration, and what we do within the Netherlands is we provide services for the Dutch citizens to get in contact with the tax office. The part I work for is customer interaction services, so we mainly focus on the visual side that interacts with the customer. And our main goal is to make our services accessible and transparent for people so that they can file their taxes easy and get what they deserve. My role is I'm a product owner. I lead the design system team through the various phases of the development process.
Perfect. Thank you. Now I also want to understand the inner workings of your team. So can you also explain, because when we look at the tax and custom administration, it's a big department. It's catering the whole nation. Of course, we are talking about the software side of the equation. So I also want to understand, because if I'm not wrong, when we look at this big government organizations, you folks, you also work with external vendors. Sometimes you write a lot of code internally. So I want to understand, how do you cater to the whole administration? Do you write all the code, or you work with other vendors? How does your team work?
Like you say, we have a very big IT department, and that means that a lot of things are being done at the same time, but sometimes also we have double development processes. What we try to do and achieve is make a general solution for this, so that we do not invent the wheel twice at the same time. We have a team of UX writers, researchers, front-end developers, and what we try to do is get all these wishes from the organizations back into our product. So we make a generic component library which all these internal vendors can use, and with that have a very generic development process. The way we achieve this is by getting into contact. So we have a lot of sessions where we try to get the desires or the problems that these teams are facing above board, so that we can do it together. So there's like a little bit of community within our own government.
So if I'm not wrong, it's more or less like you folks create like Lego building blocks that other teams can use. So it's not like writing custom code for every team. Many teams can leverage, so it also kind of avoids a lot of waste of code, and a lot of reusability is there. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. It's usability, but what we also see a lot is that we have a lot of interaction with the citizens of the Netherlands, which gives us a lot of knowledge. And this knowledge is sometimes isolated to the people that do these interviews. And what we try to do is make this knowledge publicly accessible. So when we make improvements to our components, for instance, that everyone within the organization can leverage these innovations.
You also have sessions with other teams to understand, which I feel like it's more or less like inner source, where you're within the organizations, your code base is like open source, but within where other other teams, software teams or other teams can also interact and learn about it. So because information is the key, they should know what building blocks are available. So is that what it is?
Yeah, and that's also where the desire came from, by creating this little community inside and seeing the success that this brought. This should be scaled to a higher level, and that's why we started to show interest into the open source community, because if it's successful indoors, it can be even more successful outdoors.
Do you have any process where you don't just share with internal teams, but you also are just to educate, inform the other folks in Netherlands, so they can also look at it?
So the way we have the interaction with the citizens is we have a lot of sessions where we get these citizens in, we present them with problems that we identify from the field, but also with potential solutions. So we actually have the citizens verify our assumptions, because a lot of times assumptions can be the biggest enemy of progress. So this is where we get actual citizens involved. We get citizens to make it tangible, and with these interactions we're trying to make our service better. because it's not only for them to learn, but it's also for us a very a learning experience.
The code that you write internally, how much it is open source? By open source, I do not mean necessarily that you have released your code, but you are using a lot of open source libraries, a lot of open source components to write these building blocks.
Our building blocks, of course, we look at information that's already out there. So if something has been done already, we should not reinvent the wheel. So what we try to do is always look outside, see what has been done, and if we can iterate on that. So not start from scratch, but start from projects from other governments, things like that, or projects from the wild, commercial projects even, because I think that knowledge does not have any borders, and this is the way we try to involve the community, but also learn from the outside, learn across borders, and take this information in and apply that to our own product.
You folks are here at the Open Source Summit, and you're also, if I'm not wrong, members of the LF Europe. Is that correct? So talk a bit about why you joined Linux Foundation Europe, why you are here, and what is your open source story?
Well, that's three questions packed into one, so I'm going to start from the beginning. First of all, why we're here is just to find interaction. We see that there is a lot of interaction going on already on an organized level, so government agencies talking to each other. But what's also really important is that we get out there, we tell our story, we feel the space. But also unite with other government agencies, because I think within the Linux Foundation they have a great ambition to make the public sector more represented. But to be represented, you should always also be there. So for us it's really important to just be here, make connections, see where we're at and see where we can go. And I think that for us is the biggest takeaway from here today, is find other government agencies that are also trying to make the leap towards going open source. And we have the same issues across the board. We're all governments, we are all the public sector, and let's see where we can find each other. And I think that's where our main goal or our main takeaway is for joining the conference today.
Right. Can you also talk about what kind of culture you have internally for your developers team?
Well, here I'm going to plug a shout out to my team. I've been blessed with a team of really, really amazing professionals that bring passion to their job every day. And this passion is something that we try to infect people around us with. So the way we try to achieve this is because we are the face of the tax office. We have a very central position, and this allows us to share our knowledge with other teams. So other teams flock to us with questions, and that gives us an opportunity to grab hold of them and inspire them to look outside and not think in just their own product, but also look around, look at your colleague. What's your colleague doing? Can you learn from it? So it's more of an inspirational role that we have to try to enable people to look what's out there.
These days, a lot of public sector, private sector, they also have dedicated departments, offices to how to deal with open source. They have open source program offices, open source program offices. Do you have any such office in the tax administration as well, or not yet?
Yeah, so we have the open source office, it's the Bureau Open Source Software, and that's for the tax office, and we also have that on a national level. So we have a kind of layered structure within the Dutch government, but also within the tax office itself, where we try to find the best way to represent the public sector on the front of open source.
Can you talk about the open source program office that you mentioned?
In 2021, we started to feel the waters. We want to go open source, but how do we do it? How do we achieve it? So from our CTO office, we started a Bureau Open Source Software, where they are actively trying to find people and solutions within the organizations that they can promote to go open source. For us, it's a big challenge because we need to pave the road. There's no road, and we need to find a way to go through there. And this is what the Bureau Open Source Software does for us. It gives us guidelines, but it also connects us to initiatives like the Linux Foundation. And for us, it's a very big help to have these processes in place, but also this networking and finding these opportunities that we can leverage to make the European rules open source unless actually tangible. And this is what the Open Source Program Office does for us.
Can you talk about the challenges that the Open Source Program Office faces?
Well, I think first of all, the biggest challenge they have is what every pioneering office has. You're the first one doing it, and that means that a lot of things are not known yet. So you need to be able to adapt, to change. You need to develop a kind of gut feeling. Where can you go? But also, when is something there to be parked, and when should you find a way around it? What is the possibility? But are you also still achieving your goals? Because open source is not a goal for itself. But for us, it's a means to make our services more transparent and to give it back to the people of the Netherlands. So I think the biggest challenge for the open source office is finding the right route to getting everything out there, and it comes with challenges, with successes. And I think the biggest challenge is to keep it going and also take a big organization through this journey and get everyone involved, get everyone inspired. And I think this is a very big role for our open source office.
How much awareness about open source do you see, not only in the public sector, but in general in the market or in Netherlands for the grassroots students level, education level?
In the Netherlands, we have a very big culture of transparency. We have a very liberal country. So I think that there's a big willingness from the Dutch citizens to contribute, not only take from the government, but also give back. And I think this is a culture that we have a long history with. And I see a lot of open source initiatives starting from the Netherlands, but also a lot of people from the Netherlands contributing to open source projects. And I think we are definitely inspired to take this to the next level as the government, but also as a country.
As we look at any other government entity, of course, you have teams where you work internally, you write a lot of code, but then you have also vendors, external, some are contractor, of course, everybody is contractor. But can you also talk about the role of open source program office between these two words, the internal public sector and the external private sector?
So what you see a lot is the interaction between the private and the public sector is mostly a vendor, and we use a product. And the bridge that we are really making is that we are talking about solutions. So we are making sure that we are doing the right thing at the right time. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from open source, is that we have this actual collaboration. It's not just a list of wishes that we have, but it's also how can we contribute and how can we solve this problem together. And I think this is what our program office brings to the table. It's an open collaboration. It's getting the things done that actually need to be done. And I think this is the biggest takeaway from our open source office.
How open source enable the collaboration that you're talking about across boundaries, across companies, across departments? The role open source can play there.
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest takeaway and the biggest break of these boundaries is that we are not only connecting on a formal government level, but we are also connecting the developers. It's the people that actually make these solutions, and we get these people to work together and inspire each other. And I think this is what breaks boundaries and builds bridges. It's they have the same passion, and it doesn't matter where you work, where you're from, what your age, what your ethnicity, what your gender, but they have a passion. And if you connect through this passion, it's very difficult not to build bridges. And this is the connection that open source brings for us. It's a free podium for us to connect on a personal level, on a passion level. And I think this is what open source brings. And there is no boundary between private and public once you take your badge off. And I think this is what open source does for us.
These days, one of the hottest topic here in Europe, even at the Linux Foundation, this event is going on, fix CRAs, the Cyber Resilience X. The fact is that there are great intentions. I think it's just some miscommunication happened between how the open source works versus what the law wants. As I said, the intentions are great, but somehow somebody misses how the actually open source community works. So can you also talk about what are your thoughts about that, and what your teams, your department, or organizations are doing to kind of maintain the balance there?
Well, I think that you have a key part here identified when you say it comes from miscommunication. And what we think is the only way to solve miscommunication is to keep communicating. And that's what we try to achieve. So we have our cyber department, which was our first user to go interdepartmental, and we just keep talking to each other. Where are the gaps that we identify? How can we help? How can we contribute? And how can we best solve the issues that we have present today? And how can we give feedback also back? Because we are experiencing things in the field, and this experience gives us knowledge. And I think it's very important that we keep trying stuff, but also feed back this knowledge so that we can do the right things, because I think it comes from a good place. But sometimes we just need to keep talking with each other and get the feedback back to the people that have to make the decisions, because they don't always know how it is in the field, and we do. So it's not about blaming, it's about transparent communication back and forth. And I think just by keeping the communication lines open, that we can all work together to get the best processes out there. And I think resilience is really important. We need to do things the right way. We need to make sure that things are good and secure. We have a responsibility to our citizens and to each other as countries, as nations. So I think by collaborating and keep the conversations open, that we will eventually get to the best processes out there.
When I look at open source, I feel that yes, it's about software code, but open source is more about collaboration and bringing the community together. The code is the easy part. I use collaboration, interaction, that is the communication, that is the more important. So when we talk about open source, how do you look at open source, and what aspect of open source that you feel are as important as just the source code?
Well, and I think that's a very good question, and that's something we have a lot of experience with in our team. We work in an agile environment, multidisciplinary teams, and what we see, it's not just one person in the team achieving the goals, but it's also the people around it that enable these goals. And I think the biggest takeaway that we can have within open source is by also enabling these people, the contributors from the sidelines, the people that make it possible, the people that write the documentation, do the research. And I think there's a very big chance for us to also get these people on board and make them part of the open source community. Because like you say, we are in this together. It's about building a community, and the community is only as strong as all the people within it. So yeah, it's not just about the code, but it's also about the guy that puts it out there, and even further, the guy that makes sure that we have workplaces to even write our code. And it's a chain, and I think every part in this chain deserves a bit of the spotlight, because we're in it together. And I think this is somewhere where we can take open source even to the next level.
And one of the core components is also communication, which the role that you're playing here to actually communicate what you're doing, because without communication, without education, people won't even know. And then, the bubble will be much smaller. Alain, thank you so much for taking time out today and gave us a great overview of how the tax administration works, and how inner source, open source, all the collaboration that you folks are doing there. Thank you so much. And I would love to chat with you folks again to learn more about your working and the progress you're making towards more open adoption of open source. Thank you.
You are very welcome. Thank you for having me. And yeah, we would love to continue this conversation at a later point. And to all the listeners, you're very welcome to also contribute where you can, because it's everyone's software, it's everyone's product. And we would love to get you all on board.